All right, well, it's good to catch up, Craig. It's been a little while since we had a chat about how things are progressing with CHEP. We were just reviewing the videos. I think it was November last year when we actually last kind of did a bit of a progress report. So unbelievably, nearly 12 months ago.
Yep.
You guys started in with a pilot in Queensland from memory in January 2019.
Yes.
Been working hard in the hop space ever since, really. So let us know what's been going on in 2020, really.
Yeah, so obviously 2020's been very much dominated by COVID, and I suppose the good thing is that our journey with hop didn't stop because of COVID, and it was certainly impacted our learning teams. We ran less learning teams because it was a little bit more difficult to get facilitators to attend some of the sites, but we still focused on using those hop principles within our facilities to make sure that we're still having those valuable conversations. So, and that showed through in our results. So we didn't see we weren't going backwards in 2020 as far as our overall safety performance. So it was we actually posted quite a great year.
Yeah. Okay. So that's interesting. A bit of a teaser there. So great results. What have been some of the great results?
Yeah. So so basically, the program we ran was within the business was still underpinned by four key pillars, and that's exceptional leadership, staff engagement, safe processes, and supporting systems. And hop is weaves its way through all four of those pillars as we sort of as we work with our teams. So I mean, if you look at three outcome measures, and as I say, measures of safety, you need to look at the business a lot more holistically than just outcome measures. But the high level outcome measures were that within Asia Pacific, which is a region that I look after, we actually had a 30% improvement on the reportable injury frequency rate compared to FY19. We had 83% of our locations were reportable injury free, and we had it was a 64% reduction in injury severity rate, which again then translated onto almost a 70% reduction in workers' compensation payouts. So obviously your severity rates are very closely linked to those tangible workers' compensation costs. And what that means from a people point of view is that it doesn't mean we didn't have incidents. We still had incidents, but the nature of those incidents was changed. So we weren't having the large incidents that we might have had a few years ago. It's the injuries are very much more minor that we're seeing now, which is a great result. What it means is we don't rest on our laurels. We're going to continue to work on the things, because ideally we don't want anyone hurt within the business. But the initial goals of this was to make sure that we weren't having anything significant, which is and we've achieved that.
Yeah, that's a pretty phenomenal set of results for considering how recent some of these changes have been. That's a pretty impressive set of figures, and obviously that's great in terms on the lag data, on the outcome data. But are you seeing other sort of less tangible benefits, I guess?
Yeah. So some of the less tangible benefits we're seeing. Well, if I look at some of the lead indicators that we see within the business, we've changed. I suppose hop has enabled us to progress down a path of changing the way we train our people through a verification of competency method. So rather than the traditional classroom training, hop promotes those one-on-one conversations that occur on the floor, and so we've changed our training model to reflect that. We're looking at Also, the number of hazards and near misses that were reported within the business, we exceeded our target by over 40% with those. And the pleasing thing with that is that we had a 99% closeout rate at the end of the financial year of actions arising from those hazards. So you don't just want people to identify them; we want to make sure that we're doing something about them. And one of the a really key indicator of how people are seeing our safety journey is we ran a pulse survey, and that was about halfway through FY20, and the response to the safety question was the highest of all of the questions put to our employees. So this is a company-wide survey. So within our region, it was a response of 87 out of 100. So it was actually increased on the previous year slightly, but it was still the highest rating response of all of the responses given. But what we were seeing was some pleasing results in, as I say, identification of hazards, number of learning teams completed, improved, the action closeout rate from actions arising from those learning teams. They're all things that give a more holistic reflection of how safety is progressing within the business. So not just focusing on those lag indicators.
Yeah, awesome. So there's some pretty impressive figures there, Craig, and it sounds like the company's making some great progress. So where to next? What are some of the things you've got, other priorities you've got going on at the moment and things you're working on?
So our focus within, so we're still maintaining a big focus on those across those 4 pillars that I mentioned. We will still have an intense focus on things like pedestrian segregation within our facilities, so that pedestrian mobile plant interactions. We'll still have an intense focus on machine guarding and machine access safety, again within the business. And what HOP does is it allows us, it's like a vehicle that allows us to explore those situations in a different way to get a better quality outcome. Some of the areas that we're looking to improve in relation to HOP itself is building our pool of facilitators. So that's the learning team facilitators, as you sort of impressed on us, and that I sort of obviously share with people that I talk to is getting the right facilitators for learning teams is absolutely critical. People need to be living and breathing the principles of HOP, and they need to be able to facilitate a group to get the most out of that exercise. So we want to build.
Craig, just sorry to cut across there. What are the types of people you've found have been really successful facilitators so far here in APAC?
So we started with my team, which is the health and safety team, but we've also some of the service centre managers within our operations team, so our facility managers. Some of those showed a real flair for facilitation, and so they were part of the initial group as well. One sort of important point to note is with those learning teams in the early stages, and we still try to avoid this, is if a facilities manager was a facilitator, we get that person to facilitate learning teams in another facility. Yes. So that they're not facilitating one where they are within the chain of command of that the people in the room. We find that's critical to being able to establish and maintain that feeling of trust and openness in the learning team.
Yeah, definitely.
So we've also had some interest from some of our sales team as well. So there'll be some training coming up for some of that cohort as well.
Yeah, awesome. It's I think that's one of the things that people start to realise is learning teams. It's and you can see it as a plus or a negative. All your technical kind of safety background, knowledge, and experience doesn't necessarily equip you to be able to be a good facilitator of learning teams. It's like learning a new set of skills for those who have not been used to doing that kind of work. Yeah,
and that's a really important point. The trick, one of the tricks to being a great facilitator is being able to park what you think you know. and they talk about listening without judgment, let people tell their stories, and take a walk in their shoes. Don't think that you know what they experience. So your role as a facilitator is just to keep the stories going, and the information will flow from there.
Yeah, awesome. So that's one of your priorities, building, I guess, continuing to grow your pool of facilitators.
Yep.
Yeah, that sounds.
Well, the other one, I suppose, which is a key one for us this year is an initiative that we're putting together to get more benefit from the use of those HOP principles beyond learning teams. So we find that learning teams are more of a formal exercise in HOP, but what we want to try and promote within our, particularly within our operations facilities, is those day-to-day conversations, curious conversations, if you want to give it a tag, but those HOP style conversations between a supervisor or between a team leader and their people, that they invite that feedback on a daily basis. So what we're doing is putting together an initiative and some materials to try and coach the business and encourage the business to use those HOP type questionings, those very open questions, those questions that invite stories, using those as the language that they use on the floor. We know when we get really good at that, then there won't be too many secrets on the floor. I mean, the stuff that is hurting our people, the stuff that is challenging our people, will be out in the open so that we can actually do something about it.
Yeah, awesome. So I think that's one of the challenges as well. Some organizations struggle to get learning teams really happening because it ties up people. It is a more formal process, so they can find it a bit challenging to really get them happening. But I think you've nailed it there in terms of, how do we get some of these similar sort of questions and these similar sort of activities happening, but I guess in a more, less formalized and a more day-to-day kind of way. So it sounds like it's going to be a successful sort of next step for you. Yeah,
it's an exciting. I'm really looking forward to when we have the materials and the layout finished, so that we can actually start sharing it within the business. Really excited about that.
Yeah, okay, cool. Well, one of the things we always talk about in HOP as well is the fact that it's not about just improving safety, it's about improving work, it's about making, life better for our people, not just from a safety perspective, but, if we improve work, we improve outcomes across the board, not just safety. So what are some of the improvements you've seen, maybe talk us through some of the practical improvements and changes you've seen, which have probably been a win for your folks, not just from safety perspective, but for, the kind of feel-good factor, the making it easier to get work done and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I mean, I've jotted down a couple of examples here. Obviously, I think last year we had 300 actions flowing from learning teams, so it's a little bit hard for me to stay across everything at the moment. But every now and then I've got to reach out to my team and the operations team and say, look, share with me, from what you've been doing in the last X number of months, what are some of the things that have stood out for you? And we've had some examples like at one of our Western New South Wales sites in Griffith, they had they ran a learning team out there, and they had a part of the line that was jamming continuously, and the design of the line was a very old line, and they were having to use a job safety analysis to go in and access parts of the line whilst they were still energized to be able to unjam the line. And so this has been going on for a number of years. And so they ran a learning team, and one of the outcomes out of that learning team was they identified that by installing a plate, which, and I think it was one of the maintenance guys there came up with the idea, installing a plate cost $100. And it basically stopped jams in that location, and it also improved access through that area. So it was a game changer for that line within that site, which the guys really appreciated. We had there was an example in our one of our Perth sites where this is a good example of why you have more than one person in a learning team, where those stories build on stories. So they had, again, they had on one part of the pallet line, pallets would bank up, and operators would have to call out to other people to slow the line down so that they wouldn't get jams and so forth. And anyway, one of the operators within the learning team spoke up and said, look, if we had a sensor somewhere in this, in a particular location, we might be able to sort of get early warning of that. That could control the line, and we could sort of control the flows a little bit better through there and prevent those jams. And one of the other people in the learning team, who had obviously been there for a number of years, piped up and said, oh, yeah, well, we actually used to have a sensor like that in about that location, but I'm not sure why they were ever taken out. And I think it was one of these things that maybe something is removed at some point, and is never replaced. It gets forgotten about, and then you live with the aftermath of that for a number of years. So out of that, they actually hunted through the site and actually found the old sensors, and obviously refreshed them, replaced them in the line, and had significantly decreased line stoppages in that area.
Wow, that's pretty. So that's so far 2 examples, and I think the net spend at the moment is about $100.
yeah, as I say, I mean, the sensors was just something that we could fix in house, so so very cheap. But still, within sort of my region, one of the real standouts for me was one of the first learning teams that we ran, where we had quite a nasty incident where a person was hit with a forklift over in New Zealand, and it was a very small site, and the site hadn't had a reportable injury for years and years. So it sort of, Todd Conklin talks about the absence of incidents is not necessarily the presence of safety. So, and this is probably a good example of that. At face value, it appeared to be a pedestrian going into what should have been a no-go zone, and which is a forklift area, and was hit with a forklift. They weren't badly injured, so I must say that up front. There was only minor bruising, but it could have been much worse. And when we investigated it, we took a hop approach in the questioning, and ran my safety manager in New Zealand ran a learning team on this incident, asking those different sorts of questions, and what initially looked like a violation where someone had violated procedures. And we found out it turned out to be a combination of a work area layout challenge, and also the design of an in-feed line on a completely separate piece of equipment that was actually encouraging people to go over and help out teammates on a regular basis, and also to go and gather raw materials on a regular basis. And to do that, they had to walk through the no-go zone. So what should have been a no-go zone was normalised as far as access for pedestrians, and eventually, the worst occurred. So again, that was an amazing discovery out of this approach, that if we weren't open about these things, and we didn't take the learning team approach, probably wouldn't have shared the information with us that they did, that allowed us to get really underneath what some of the root causes were for that event.
Yeah, awesome. So there's so obviously that's a kind of a negative outcome in terms of initially it started what prompted that learning team. Yeah. So you've had an incident, and the learning team's been done, but still got a good outcome. But obviously, that sounds of it, some of these other learning teams have been done just more or less on either normal work, or on just troublesome lines, or just issues, kind of I guess bugbears or whatever.
Yeah. So, and that was how we started our learning teams. Is we intentionally didn't want to start learning how to do learning teams on post-incident situations, because generally people are quite tense. People are very guarded about what they say. A better way to start learning teams, we found, was to actually just take problems that people were experiencing and running a learning team on a theme on a site. And we've had a very recent example of that down in Victoria at one of our sites down there. We wash crates, and having some challenges on the line as we were going through a process of improvement. And so we, as well as some of the more structured approaches that we were using within the business, we pulled the guys aside, and it wasn't a formal learning team, but we pulled them aside in a group and just asked them, take us for a walk in your shoes. What's it like to be here and operate this equipment? What works really well here, and what's a real challenge for you here? What do you find really hard, and what would you do differently if you were the boss? And they shared some really great insights with us that allowed us to make some changes to that work environment for them. And it doesn't mean that it was the silver bullet, that everything was fixed after that, but there were some really key call outs that were shared in relation to critical placement of manning resources and things like that only working on the line you would understand what we needed to do there. So in them sharing their stories and taking us for a walk in their shoes, we were able to understand that and make those subtle changes. Even to the point where we were looking at, we rotate on all of our wash facilities throughout the country. We make sure that there are regular rotations through different positions for musculoskeletal challenges, so that you're making sure you're working the left and the right side of the body, and so different tasks, you're using your muscles different muscles throughout the shift. And we would generally rotate. I think they rotate down there about every half an hour, but what they were finding was sometimes they'd be rotating around about that. Sometimes they wouldn't rotate for an hour and a half. And so it was really erratic because they get caught up in the moment with working on the machine. It's very erratic on how frequently they were rotating. And that can have impacts on how sore you are feeling at the end of the day. So, so one of the guys down there just spoke up and said, "Can you just buy us a clock that we can just hang up on the machine in front of us, and we'll look after the rotations. You don't need to tell us when to rotate, but we just get caught up, and we just need something visual down there to refer back to." So you might think that it's not rocket science that anyone can get a clock, but we hadn't picked it up as the site leadership. And until we'd actually asked the guys to really take us through your experience, at that point it started to come out to say a very simple little change could really help them feel better at the end of the day, because they'd sort of rotated through the different tasks on a more regular basis.
And I think that's one of the key differences, and I guess one key changes with when you start taking these approaches and doing things like HOP. It's this assumption that in the past that we know what's best and we know that things are going to really improve work and make things better for everyone. Yet sometimes big wholesale changes and big programs of change don't achieve as much as a small thing, which can be just come from directly from the guys who do the job every day. And so, hang on a minute, just a clock, that'll be a good start.
We've actually had a couple of learning teams that have called out things like two-way radios. So where people would need to communicate with other people and they'd have to walk down there or scream out across the factory floor and stuff. Some of our sites have two-way radios, other sites don't. And in this same location, but on a different machine, that was actually called out during another learning team where we needed the safer way to do a line clearing exercise was with two people. And the person in that location used to have to go and find someone in a different area of the plant to help them. They just said, "Can you just give us a couple of two-way radios?" And they did, and they said it just made a huge difference to just being able to work more comfortably throughout the day and being able to contact each other. So that's one which has come out of a couple of different sites.
Yeah, wow. So I think the message I'm hearing is, and this is, I guess, the message to other people who listen in. People worry that you do learning teams and there's going to be these huge ideas that are going to be massively expensive to implement, and it's going to be, and of course some things do come up which require capex and require kind of some medium-term planning and management buy-in and so forth. But many of the ideas that come out of learning teams oftentimes are eminently doable very quickly with minimal sort of cost and time imposition.
Yeah, and it's something we do at the start of every learning team, because not not every person who is engaged in a learning team has been taken through formal HOP training before. So we have a really simple little slide deck. It's about 10 slides that the facilitator takes the 3 or 4 people through for about 10 minutes at the start of the learning team.
Yeah.
It tells them about what the 5 principles are, what we're about. It is an atmosphere of trust, but one of the slides depicts the sphere of control. And this is really important, we found, within the learning team. So it's that graphic that within the center are things that are within your, if you're looking at idea generation or action generation, there are some ideas which are within your sphere of control, direct control at that facility. There are some that are within your sphere of influence. So you may have some control, but you may need outside help to complete it. And then beyond that, you've got things that are within your sphere of concern that are still a genuine problem. They've still come out as an issue, but you may have very little control over how to change that. And so we take people through that very simple concept at the outset, so that when it comes to pulling the themes together from all of the individual feedback within the learning team, and they're starting to brainstorm ideas, if they've got that in the back of their mind, they know that if they can find a simple, neat solution for it that sits within the sphere of control, it's going to be done quickly, it's going to be done cheaply, and they're not going to need to reach out to other people to have input. They can do it within their work teams on the site. So we've actually found using that little model, very simple little model, quite effective in framing it from the outset within the learning teams.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, that sounds really good. And the fact that you said you've had 300 actions come out from learning teams in 12 months, this obviously isn't being pushed from the top anymore. This is obviously just becoming quite an organic and natural thing.
Yeah, we're starting, as I say, the feedback from my team at the sites is that they're actually starting to see our workers within the factories starting to ask for learning teams themselves now. So they're starting to understand what these things are about. They've seen the results that have come from it. They understand that it's a no blame exercise. So they really can say exactly what happens and how they need to adapt. And so because they're actually enjoying that experience of really being listened to, we're seeing them ask for learning teams where they see a challenge on the site. So, but we're careful. We have been careful very early in the piece. We sort of stung ourselves a little bit that we thought we might run a plethora of learning teams across the business, and it was within our pilot region, which was in Queensland. And so we scheduled a whole heap of learning teams, and what we found was the amount of information that flows from just one of these learning teams is quite large, and we swamped ourselves in actions which flow from it that we couldn't I suppose live up to the commitments that we were making. So we sort of pared that back a little bit, and we focus on not trying to boil the ocean out of a learning team. We target the things that we can achieve, and we commit to those.
Yeah.
So that was I suppose if you look at a mistake that we might have made earlier on, that was it, is we tried to run too many learning teams in too short a space of time, and we just overwhelmed ourselves.
Yeah. And I guess it's easy to do, and there's a lot of enthusiasm being generated, and people are really excited about some of the ideas and things that are being generated. The natural tendency is keep on doing more learning teams, but I guess you've got to measure that, I guess, and just be careful so it's not, you say, not to overwhelm yourself.
And I think, I suppose, as I mentioned earlier, the initiative that we're working on at the moment, where we're focusing on those day-to-day HOP-style conversations to encourage more of them, what you'll find is if we get good at that, then you don't need to wait for a learning team and a flood of actions to flow out of that. What we'll see is that at a facility, actions will drip feed out on a regular basis, because something will become a concern and it'll be raised quickly and it'll be addressed quickly. And so you're only dealing with sort of 1 or 2 actions at a time, rather than a big action list which might flow out from a more formal event.
Yeah, cool. So I guess these are some really great examples of like the operational learning that's been going on, whether it's been through learning teams or other things. I guess, how have you started tying this in more broadly with, I guess, organizational strategy and direction and building alignment with HOP more broadly?
So, so what we have at the moment is as part of our national business plan for the whole of business, particularly in CHEP Australia and also CHEP New Zealand. It is part of the whole of business strategic plan. So we have an action in there under the safety, the area of safety. We have an action around the expansion of the usage of the HOP principles, and also we have a tangible action around closeout of actions on time. So I think it's a really important metric. So it's not just that you close actions out. A big part of your commitment to people is what you put the due date as. So if you say you're going to do something, don't just do it, but do it within the time frame that you've agreed to. And so we've actually we've got a national metric where we measure that on a monthly basis as part of the business strategic plan. And I think that was a great change. So for the first time, it's been, it's baked into that strategic plan.
So I guess that's a bit of a lead indicator then in terms of measuring how you're going in terms of acting on the stuff that's coming back.
Yeah, I think action closeout, on time action closeout is a critical lead indicator because because the people that are raising the ideas and the people that are helping you formulate those actions, once you've locked it in, you've made a commitment to them. And if you're not doing those actions, or you're not doing them by the due date, then you're sort of falling short on your commitment to your people. So it's really important to hit your targets within that particular metric.
Yeah, awesome. So tell me about Safer Together and Take 45. I think these are some of the things, activities that you've been working on to, I guess, make more HOP centric, I guess.
So the Safer Together is the one that I've explained about. That's the initiative to coach our people to use HOP on a more infrequent, informal basis. Yep. So we had to give it a name. We always have to give something a name. So,
okay,
so
yeah.
that's what we've called it, is Safer Together. And I think I like it. It sort of resonates with me. Safer Together is what HOP is about. You can't. It's not just the workers, the workers on the shop floor doing things. It's not just leadership doing things. HOP is about a whole of business approach. So that's that initiative that we're working on.
Yeah.
A couple of the other ones which we're doing a little bit differently. So again, HOP is not about, and safety differently is not about throwing out everything you've done in the past. It's about doing some things differently. So the stuff you've done in the past is the foundations to get you to where you are today, which is all very valuable. And so stop for safety sessions and Take 45 walks. So a Take 45 walk is really a walk that we would do with our people at different times. We would generally do it within our company safety week that we have, usually March or April. And our leaders would go around to all of the facilities, and on every shift within every facility, we would go for a walk with the operators. And we'd look at hazards, and they would show us some of the wins they've had or some of the challenges. We've just changed the way that we're doing that now, and so we start the Take 45 walks, and we ask them to tell us a few stories about what it is like to work in that facility. So what is working well? Where are they seeing that people are making mistakes? Where can those mistakes lead to large consequence as opposed to minor consequence? So our Take 45 walks are based around those. Stop for safety. Most companies will do some sort of variant of stop for safety where it might be after an event. You want to put a bit of emphasis in a particular area of safety or an aspect of the plant. So you bring the shift team in, you have a talk, you stop work. Um, Traditionally, a lot of those stop for safety exercises have been focused that if we ask people to take a breath, slow down, and focus on what they're doing, then they will make less errors and therefore be safer.
Mm.
And I suppose what they miss is, I think it's good that people stop and take a breath and just slow down a little bit, because we know rushing can lead to mistakes in itself.
Mm.
But they more focused on the behaviours of the people and trying to correct the behaviour itself. What we've changed those to now is the conversations we have within Stop for Safety is about stop, take a breath, take it easy. But now tell us what it's like to work here. Tell us where the challenges are at the moment. We might have done a lot of work in some areas. Tell us where the next challenges are. Okay, what doesn't feel right with you? We've done some where we might focus on a procedure, and we said, okay, let's pull apart the procedure and take us through the areas of this procedure that just don't make sense. Okay, it might have been written with the best intent, but it probably hasn't been written by the person that's actually doing the job. So we changed our Stop for Safety sessions to have more of a conversation-based approach. We're using those HOP-style conversations, and they've been working really well. So it's not about throwing out everything you've done in the past. It's maybe just taking a different bent to that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really important point too, because some of the, shall we say, HOP or safety different zealots sell it in a way in which it sounds like everything up until now is now defunct and needs to be discarded in quick time, and replaced with something new, a new term and a new name. And but we know there are some things obviously organisations have been doing for a long time that have improved safety, and CHEP already had a pretty good safety record coming into this anyway. So it would be foolish to say, okay, CHEP, you guys, you've got so much to learn and so many new things you need to be doing. Obviously, there's been new tools you've been introduced, but oftentimes it's then just putting a new flavour and a new tangent onto existing tools and things you're already using. Yeah,
look, the big change has really been how we've engaged with our people. That's the big change with HOP is if you think of a more traditional process improvement, it will be more centered around what the standard procedure should be, and it will be a little bit more superficial. So it'll be talking about what people should be doing or the way the process should operate, and you will get improvements going down that path, no doubt, and we have for many years. But there was still a lot of stuff happening in the business that just didn't make sense. Like we would have an accident that when you'd look at it, it would be a person that had a great, safety, great safety values. They might have been a safety leader within the site or whatever, and then something has happened that just didn't make sense. So we knew that the way that we'd have been approaching it, whilst it had got us to where we were, there was still something missing. And so the big change for us with HOP has been, it allows you to actually get underneath the stuff that, as I say, a site manager or a supervisor, that you really don't know about. That's only really the people that are doing the job know between themselves. This is how you actually have to work to get this job done.
Yeah. No, I think you definitely get those, like you say, those deeper level insights and understanding. So I guess some other thoughts, I guess most organizations have this. So yeah, you start doing something like HOP, safety differently, whatever. You've still got all the same obligations, right? As a PCBU and as officers in the organization, you still have these same obligations. So how does HOP help you with those sorts of statutory obligations and the more traditional stuff we think about in terms of safety?
Yeah. So as we all know, so the PCBU and the officers, so that we have a duty within the legislation to understand the risks associated with the work environment, the processes, and then you need to either eliminate or control those risks. Until you actually understand the blue line. So for people that haven't sort of done HOP, the very simple model, black line, blue line. Black line represents how you think work is done, which is a very linear approach. It might represent a procedure. The blue line is more of a wavy line that represents the reality of how work is actually done. And most times we actually don't see that. We don't recognise that is how people need to get work done. Until you understand the detail of the blue line, you can't truly understand the reality of the risks in your workplace. So HOP in itself is a great way of getting a much better understanding of the risks. Even after you've done your formal risk assessments and you think you've risk assessed your process, once you put people into that mix and they need to work and they need to adapt to get the job done, you then need to understand the blue line to understand, okay, what are some of those additional risks? So in that way, it's a great tool to enable the PCBU and the officers of the business to make sure that they are understanding more fully what their processes are.
Yeah. And I would certainly echo that. You know, we often tell organisations who are thinking about this stuff, well, you know, we know you've got your obligations, we've got things like due diligence and things we need to be doing. This only helps and enhances that.
Yeah.
You know, I'd argue that any approach you're putting in place under HOP is only going to strengthen the organisation's position in terms of due diligence and understanding what's really happening in the organisation.
Yeah. So you still need to assess and control risk. You still need policies and procedures, okay? Because they're the way that you record knowledge about the safe way to do a task. But we also need to, and then we need to train people in those procedures. But what we also need to do is make sure that our training encompasses, okay, the procedure is like a baseline and defines a safe way, but we also need to train people on where they may need to adapt, and when they do need to adapt, how to do it safely. So, and in that way, what we end up doing is designing those sort of error tolerant or resilient processes. So that's our aim. So we're still on that journey ourselves with our policies and procedures, but we know where we need to head with that. But all that stuff still needs to be in place to make sure that you have a well-rounded approach to safety as a business.
Yeah. Awesome. So it goes without saying, CHEP, Brambles, is an international business. You guys have been doing, I guess, pioneering work here in Australia and New Zealand. But is this just working in Australia and New Zealand, or is this kind of cutting across different cultures and different parts of the business?
No, it's definitely what we found with HOP is it very much is because it's about working with your people. It really is an international language. Now, it doesn't mean that different cultures will take to it as readily as other cultures. We are seeing some slight differences, but on the whole, it's equally applicable in Australia and New Zealand as it is in the US and Europe and in China, in Thailand. So we're seeing some great results coming out of the US and Europe with this approach, and also South Africa are doing some great work. So our business in South Africa, I attended some training over there it was about 12 months ago, and what they've done since then, they're actually starting to use some learning teams with their sites over there and their workers, and there's not much difference when you actually take the time to experience what it is to be a person working in that situation. It's no different to experiencing, taking the time to experience what it's like to work here in Australia and so forth. So the things that they will tell you are things that on, as a manager, you really don't know unless you experience it yourself or you're able to find that out through something like HOP.
Yeah. I think that's been our experience of it too, and even our experience with CHEP. We've been fortunate to go to a fair few countries now with CHEP, and it doesn't matter where we go, the same response happens. The same sort of enthusiasm and the same interest and the same sort of okay, when can we get started and what can we do? So it really does cut across boundaries and even languages. With it, when we did the training in Europe, we had I lost count. I think it was 6 or 7 at least different languages spoken as the kind of primary language, and everyone was just about getting by in English, because of course we don't speak anything else, being an Aussie and a Pom, the two of us who went over to the training. So well, that didn't dampen the enthusiasm either. Everyone was just so on board and so engaged. So I think that's probably a great testament to CHEP and the culture you have in the business as well.
Yep.
So I guess you've been doing this now for 18 months, 2 years, something like that, thinking about this and starting to put it into action. So I guess what would be some of your kind of key tips and takeaways for people who are in a similar sort of position, thinking about saying, well, thinking about stepping off and doing something like HOP?
Yeah, so look, some tips that we'd have is the most important one is start small. Okay, this is not something that I think you can do the shotgun approach and do it right across the business immediately. It shouldn't be approached as some off the shelf package or program.
Yeah.
It's a change in the thought process of the business. So my advice is to do what we did. We actually picked a pilot region. So we did Brisbane, and we had 4 sites in Brisbane, and so we chose those as the pilot region for this. So we did some training there. We ran some initial learning teams there. Once we had proven it in a pilot region and got that feedback from the participants and the sites, the next critical step is to get senior leadership support to grow within the company. You need something to take to the senior leadership to say, look, this is what we were able to achieve in the pilot region, for them to have the confidence to support the program. But at that point, you need senior leadership support. So, and then, use early adopters. Okay, might have been from the pilot region to advocate across the rest of the business. When you're doing learning teams or when you're training people, really spend a lot of time on explaining why we're doing HOP. Okay, what are the benefits of this approach, and spend a lot of time ensuring that people understand what the 5 principles are. We do this, as I said, we do this at the start of every learning team as well. Okay, so that everyone in that learning team at least has a base understanding of what we're going to be talking about. As I said, start with proactive learning teams, not learning teams after an event, some sort of significant event, because people are generally tense and less inclined to open up about what's really going on. Get people used to the process, get the business used to the process, and then you can merge, start to utilise it after events that might be occurring. And above all, listen without judgment, and emphasise that concept of it's a no blame conversation that we're having. Because once the participants really start to understand that, there's some quite astounding information which will flow out of that exchange. So that's probably some key call outs on how you might start this.
I think one of the key things you mentioned there was getting people familiar with the 5 principles and explaining why HOP's important.
Yep.
Because oftentimes what seems to really grab people's attention are the new tools, things like learning teams and stuff like that. People get very excited about that. But the thing we kind of always tell people is the learning team or whatever the new tool is nothing without the underpinning philosophy. And otherwise, you're just not going to get any sustainable sort of traction with this. So you really do need to start be building and then maintaining and growing that fluency when it gets with the operating philosophy, not just the new tool and the new approach.
Yeah. If you don't spend that time and you don't sort of listen without judgment, approach it as a no blame, from a no blame perspective, what you'll end up doing is more having a conversation around the black line.
Yeah.
Okay. So you won't actually get to the blue line. They'll people will hold that close and won't really share that. And your conversation will be more about the black line. So you will still get benefits out of that conversation, no doubt, but you're not maximising your opportunity in that situation.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Craig, I think we've covered off on quite a bit here in terms of from where you guys started, some of the things you've been doing, some of the successes you've had with learning teams, the successes you've had with HOP across your kind of the international business, some kind of key tips. What gets a closing thought, last thought or reflection for our listeners?
Well, as I say, it's I sort of reiterated this. It's not an off-the-shelf program. This is a change in the thought process of the business in relation to how they see their people. Okay, this is about truly seeing your people, and so I'd encourage people to have the courage to take a different path to be able to achieve that next step change in the safety culture within the business, and don't forget, when you're looking at the success of a program or the success of an approach like this, look at safety holistically. And what are those holistic indicators? You will have an outcome measure or a few outcome measures, but make sure that you're also measuring and focusing on those measures of safety capacity because they're critically important. So,
awesome. Oh, well, Craig, I know you're a busy man, so thank you very much for your insights and your thoughts on HOP, and we'll look forward to hearing more of your progress in the future.
No worries. Thanks very much, Andy.